I've never been to Spain before, and I've always wanted to come, so I'm really excited. I've really enjoyed every moment of being here so far, and I've been here since Saturday. I want to start by talking a little bit why I went to Mepkin Abbey in the first place. Back in 1996, I was an entrepreneur with my company, a startup, a shoehorn startup, but we started for $2,500 and a couple of Hail Marys. And we had built it up over a couple of years. And meanwhile, I was working with college students at Duke University, the University of North Carolina State University on religious and spiritual stuff. I was doing this on a volunteer basis. And some students at Duke suggested that we go skydiving as a team building exercise. And I talk about it in my book, Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks. I said I was brave enough to jump out of an airplane, but I was not brave enough to tell those kids I was too damn old to be jumping out of airplanes. And I hit the ground and smashed my ankle to smithereens. I had 2 compound fractures of my bones in my ankle. And I'm not going to tell too much about this story. That's not my purpose of being here, but I woke up in the hospital having terrible panic attacks and depression, which launched me into a 2-year dark night of the soul. Actually, I'm writing a book about that right now. But in the meantime, I get a telephone call from one of my students that following summer, and he said, I want you to know that at least one of your students is following your advice. And I said, what advice? And you told us to do something meaningful with our summer vacation rather than just chasing girls and drinking beer. And I said, I don't remember saying that, but it's a good idea. I said, what are you doing? And he said, I'm spending the entire summer with these Trappist monks. And before I said, I have to come. Where are you? And so the very next weekend, I was at Mepkin Abbey. And I came back the next weekend and the next weekend and the next weekend, and I eventually applied for a status as what's called a monastic guest at Mepkin Abbey. It's kind of unusual, which means you wear a habit, you live behind the cloister wall with the monks. You're expected to do everything they do. There's some private things that they do when they kick somebody out or they bring somebody new in or something where you're not invited to come to those meetings. They're called closed chapter meetings. But everything else, you live exactly. So you have to live and work. And the inspiration for this talk and everything that I've done with the Trappists, I would say, goes back to an event that I had. There was a priest there called Father Malachi. And I worked with him. I'm sure most of you know that, of course, the St. Benedict said prayer and work. They said ora et labora is the central thesis of the monastic life. So they had 40,000 chickens, and their business, they had 2 or 3 other businesses, but their main business was harvesting these chickens. Now they do mushrooms. So I worked in their egg business and grading the eggs and stuffing them into boxes and cartons and getting them into the refrigerator. That was my job. And Father Malachi, all he did was make the boxes. He would take them when they were flat, and he would unfold them and turn them into squares, and he would put them there, and I would hurry up, fill them up, and push them into the refrigerator. And as I got to know him, you don't talk very much at Trappist monasteries, but as I got to know him, because I was down there for like 3 months at this time, he was a very, very simple guy. He seemed to come across as a very, very simple man and a simple monk. I said his hands looked, he had the veins on his hands. I said they looked perfectly suited to a man who'd spent his entire life in prayer. And so then one day he told me, he said, out of nowhere, he just said that one day, some years before that, somebody had donated a huge box of theology books written in French to the monastery. And the abbot called him in and asked him, Father Malachi, please read these books and then write a summary about what they're about in English. And Father Malachi says, Father Francis thought I spoke French, but I didn't. But he's so busy, I didn't bring it up. I just stayed up late for a few months and taught myself French. Then I read the books and wrote the summaries. Oh my God, this man's working, all the time. He's up at 3 o'clock in the morning. He's going to church 8 times a day. He works in the egg business. I found out he does all these other things, and he had taught himself to be a priest, by the way, too. And so my basic question, when I finally got around to putting a little bit years later to pen to paper, what is the essence of being successful in life? What is the essence of being successful in business? And I asked the CEO one time this question. I said, what is this very successful guy that I knew? He had a $500 million company or something. I said, what is your job description? And he said, well, if you followed me around all day long, you'd probably think I do a lot of things. But I have only one job. I build passion. He said, you read stories all the time. A 110-pound woman picks a car up off a child. Why? Because she cares so much about that child. She has passion. He said, my job is to provide the whys so that my people can come up with the hows. Once passion is in place, my job is to make sure that people take enough vacation and stay the hell out of their way. And this, in a nutshell, is the essence of why the Trappists are so fabulously successful in business. Because of the passion of a man like an 87-year-old man like Father Malachi, who can set his mind to learning French in 3 months because he doesn't want to bother the abbot. So where does all of this come from? And this is the essence that I put my mind to. And I want to now real quickly go through this presentation so that we can get to the, because I think that we are suffering from an incredible spiritual crisis in Western civilization. What we lack is passion. We lack meaning. We lack purpose, higher meaning, higher purpose. Somebody introduced me to the English word not too long ago, anomie, A-N-O-M-I-E. It's when an entire culture loses its sense of meaning and purpose. And the World Health Organization, a couple of years, 10 or 15 years, said the number one crisis affecting Western civilization, not just the United States, depression, despair. And it's called and even people in America even call it the politics of despair. And I want to run down just real quickly. You have, and I did some research this morning. It's, these are American. I'm going to be talking about America specifically, but these are not just completely American. It's an unbelievable epidemic. They call it an epidemic of despair and depression in America, especially among young people. And I'll really quickly tell you, Duke University, it costs you $80,000 to go to Duke. I was on the Interfaith Council at Duke with all the ministers and the Catholic, Father Joe and everybody else, and the provost came in, and he gave us the state of the state for Duke University. This was 2005, ladies and gentlemen. And he said 25% of our incoming freshmen are on antidepressants. So I was at Catholic University 3 years ago with the faculty there, administrators, and I told them that story. And they said it is 40% now. Suicide among young people is off the Richter scale, et cetera. I don't want to spend too much time. I think you know. So you have the breakdown of the family. I was just at the Napa Institute on the family, and the man got up and he said, "I want to give you the good news first. The good news first is that divorce is a terrible number, but it's not getting worse. I want to give you another piece of good news. Illegitimate births are at a terrible number, but they're not getting worse. Now I'm going to give you the bad news. No one is getting married. No one is having any children. You know, the population of Germany is slated to go from 88 million people today to 66 million by 2050. This is why Angela Merkel invited all those people in. So, and to me, that is when people don't even bother to have children, they don't believe in the future. I have a really close friend of mine, her daughter, I have a close relationship with her daughter, she's 15 years old, and she got a telephone call from her high school that her daughter somebody called the suicide helpline, said your daughter is considering suicide. She went to her daughter and said, is this true, Lily? And Lily said, yes. She said, why? She said, what is there to live for? So anyway, I'm going to go through. So we have a terrible drug and alcohol problem. We have a terrible masculinity crisis in America. They call it men are failing to launch. They're living in their parents' basements until they're 30 or 40 years old. They don't bother to get jobs. They don't bother to, the big crisis is American boys are not going to college. In college in America, almost 65% of all students are girls now, and it's slated to go into 70%. We have the empty churches. We have called a loneliness epidemic. For the first time since they've been doing figures on it, more people live alone in America than live in any kind of community or family or anything like that. Collapsing birth rate. We have the new nihilism, the lack of big ideas. I did an article for Forbes saying, where are the big ideas? You won't hear anything from our politicians about anything except. But this is the thing. This is an Irish Catholic, Andrew Sullivan. I don't know if you've ever heard of him or not, but he's pretty famous as a writer in America. And he wrote a beautiful, and it's on the internet, by the way. And if you can't comfortably read English, you have to read this article. It's called The Poison We Pick. It's beautifully written. As somebody who struggles to write, I appreciate good writing. But he talks about how the whole opioid epidemic is not a drug problem. It is a spiritual crisis. And this is the quote that I pulled out. This nation, America, pioneered modern life. Now epic numbers of Americans are killing themselves with opioids trying to escape it. To see this epidemic as simply a pharmaceutical or chemical addictive problem is to miss something. The despair that currently makes so many people want to fly away. Opioids are just one of the ways, suicide and all those other things are other ways. Opioids are just one of the ways Americans are trying to cope with an inhuman new world where everything is flat, where communication is virtual, and where those core elements of human happiness, faith, family, community, seem to elude so many. Until we resolve these deeper social, cultural, and psychological problems, until we discover a new meaning or reimagine our religion or reinvent our way of life, the poppy will flourish. This is incredibly important. So this spiritual crisis of lack of higher meaning and purpose, anomie, lack of the usual social, ethical, and moral standards in an individual group, organization, or society. This is what's gripping. Pope Francis came out and lambasted Europe, Western Europe, a couple of years ago, saying he called it a old culture. Where the churches are empty and nobody. Right. Okay. Now the next thing I want to talk about is I say that this spiritual crisis is also a leadership crisis. And real quickly, I had the opportunity when I was a young man to move in and be the protege and live in the house with a retired man named Louis Mobley, who had founded the IBM Executive School in 1956. And he ran it until 1966. And for any of you people who are familiar with the history of business at all, IBM was the premier corporation in the world in the 60s and the 70s. And these were the people that these were the men that he churned out of the IBM Executive School in the 50s and 60s. And so I had an opportunity to live in his house and meet with him every morning, and he just poured all this management and leadership wisdom into me. And what he said, this is a picture of him, and that's me, unfortunately, when I was younger. He said, the most important task of leadership is articulating a mission of higher and meaning and purpose that people can buy into. This is what leaders do. They create a vision. They paint a story. They create the big picture and say, this is why. We create the whys so that other people can make the hows. And importantly, we'll come back to this quickly because of the monks, when we are seized by the idea, when some leader or some organization can get us fired up and passionate about some big idea that's bigger than ourselves, because what we really want is something bigger than me, because we want to lose ourselves in that. We want to forget ourselves. We want selflessness, not really selfishness. Selfishness is the reason why we're so miserable. All right. So leadership, what Mobley also taught me, he said he had to learn this the hard way. He almost failed at the IBM Executive School because he made the classic mistake of thinking leadership could be taught. Leadership cannot be taught. But, as Socrates said about virtue, it could be midwifed. In other words, you can, he said, going from a manager to an executive, it's not like going from 8th grade to 9th grade to 10th grade. It's a revolution in consciousness. It's something where you have to realize that everything you think you know is wrong. That's the first step. But most importantly, and this is the thing I don't want to spend too much time, it's a becoming process. An acorn doesn't learn how to be an oak. An acorn becomes an oak. A caterpillar doesn't learn how to be a butterfly. A caterpillar becomes. I hope I don't sound like I'm talking down. I know you guys would know what becoming is. So it's a becoming process. And what he understood was that leadership is a becoming. So it's not hopeless to try and help people become leaders, but you have to understand that it is a becoming process that only can be done through experience and experiential learning and not through didactic. Tell them what you're going to tell them what then tell them what you told them, and then they give them a test to see if they were listening. And this, so the reason I say that this is a leadership crisis is because leaders are not we don't have the leaders, or the leaders are not getting it done in ours. These visions of higher purpose and meaning, whether it's fathers and mothers in their own families, whether it's the church, whether it's our politicians, whether it's our academics, all of the collective people who are supposed to be inviting others to a bigger picture, bigger ideas, a vision of meaning and purpose, are just not getting it done. We're either bankrupt and don't have any ideas, or we don't know how to communicate them in a new world. So the Trappist tradition and the monks of Mepkin Abbey. So the secret to motivation, the secret to getting this passion out of people, is to understand that it's a transformational journey, a becoming journey. And the secret to inspiring people is inviting them on a becoming process, giving them a way in which they can become who they would really want to be, rather than just trying to teach them. There's all human motivation, the passion that you feel that leaders can bring out in people, like, or the Trappist way of life brings out in somebody like Father Maliki, can all be described in terms of transformation. We are all longing, human beings are all longing for transformation. Now, in a Catholic context, it would be transcendence. But I used transformation because it's less a loaded kind of thing. The longing for transcendence. But there's 3 kinds of transformation. When a thirsty man drinks, he transforms his condition. When a poor man hits the lottery, he has transformed his circumstances. But when Mr. Scrooge wakes up on Christmas morning and he's an utterly new man, he has experienced a transformation of being. All right, so there's 3 kinds of transformation: transformation of condition, transformation of circumstance, and transformation of being. And what we're really all longing for is the transformation of being. And this transformation of being is a transformation from selfishness to selflessness. And if you think about it real quickly, I talk about this more in my book, we hate selfishness because what we really want is we're happiest when we're lost in thought. We're happiest when we're lost in a task. We're happy, when we say the world is too much with me when we're depressed in English, what does that mean? I'm too much with myself. And I have experienced severe depression, so I know what I'm talking about. When you're really, really depressed, the reason why you're so depressed is you can't think about anything but yourself. I'm depressed. You can't get out of your own way, is what we would say in English. You can't lose yourself. You can't be even distracted, which was a transformation of condition. But ultimately, we want this transformation of being. That's what we're all longing for. Okay, I'm sorry. So what Mepkin Abbey supplies, not just to the people, and then I applied it in my own book. I talk about how I applied this. All these concepts are not just ethereal, superficial. I talk about exactly how I applied these principles to my own business and took a $2,500 investment in 1993 and turned it into 2 companies and a multi-million-dollar buyout in 1999 without ever taking any venture capital, without ever putting any of my own money in, without ever borrowing any money. By using these Trappist principles. Because the biggest problem that I run into is, oh yeah, it works for the Trappists, but it's not going to work for us. Oh yeah? Look what I did with it. So you have to build, we have to build a transformational organization. And the transformational organization is even our society itself. Not just a company or a parish or whatever. And here are and this is what leaders have to get done. First of all, you have to have a high, overarching mission worthy of being served. In my opinion, the last time America had anything like this was when John Kennedy stood up in 1960 or whatever and said, "We choose to go to the moon and do the other things." I wish I knew what the other things were. Not because they are easy, but because they are hard. And with doing that, he turned an entire country into Father Malachi's. And everybody said, yes, we're going to the moon. Nothing like that has happened since. Nobody remembers anything that any other president has said. Everybody knows that quote in America. So you need a high, overarching mission, worthy of being served selflessly. That's where the ethical component comes in. It's got to be worthy of a person putting themselves aside. It has to have a personal transformation. In the monastic tradition, this is formation. You don't learn how to be a monk. You become a monk over years. You come in as an observer, and then you become a postulant, and then you become a simple vows, then you become a novice, then simple vows, then your formal vows. So it's over a long period of time of becoming. And this is what galvanizes. They buy into that. And even people that are not monks, they go there, are buying into that. They sense this process that is happening. It's a change of heart, not a change of mind. I'm trying to change minds here today, or help minds. But ultimately, it's conversion. It's a change of heart. And this is what everybody's longing for. And you only can do this, Lou Mobley showed in business, and the monks show in religious, through what Mobley didn't call it formation at the IBM Executive School, but that's what it was. Unfortunately, too oftentimes, I believe in the church today, formation is really another word for education. It's not really a formational process. Okay, and then the third thing that you need is the community aspect. This is a collective venture. We can't do this transformational journey on our own. We need other people to help us. And that's why the Trappist tradition is so rooted in community. You need the positive peer pressure. You need people you can turn to. You need people that share your dream. This is what makes for a great company, is when people share the passion and they build on your. And I know from managing salespeople, I used to tell people that I was teaching how to manage salespeople. Don't manage individuals, manage the room. And by that, I said manage the energy level of the entire sales force. That's why I never wanted my salespeople in individual cubicles or individual. I want them to feel that energy. And what I learned over here, one person who's deadbeat will ruin all that energy for everybody else. Because we're either building energy as a community and a group, or somebody could just flatten that energy out if they're a sourpuss, as we would say in English. So here, real quickly, and I'll finish up. There's a bunch of other organizations. You take the American Marine Corps, which is the toughest of all the military services, and they're the only one of the services in America where they get more kids want to join than they can take, because they have a transformational organization. They have a high overarching mission: serve the country, serve the Marines. There's no me in that. The Marines is not offering you in their mission anything for you. They're offering you the opportunity to serve. And what we really want is to serve. What we're missing is something worth serving. So they offer you the mission to serve the country and serve the Marines. They have a personal transformation. And the personal transformation is called boot camp. You don't learn how to be a Marine. You know? You come in as a raw recruit, and over a process of time, you come out the other side a Marine through a formational process. And then finally, you have the community. I just ran into a Marine the other day, and I said, oh, I mean, this guy was as old as I was. And I said, oh, man, it's really cool to meet you. I said, I understand you're an ex-Marine. No such thing as an ex-Marine. Always a Marine. That's a passion, ladies and gentlemen. That's a passion. He hasn't been in the Marine Corps for 50 years. Don't you say I'm not a Marine. You know, I would love to hear people saying that about, where I work for, the university. That kind of passion, that kind of grit is just a beautiful thing to see. And when I saw it in business, it was just, that's the magic. That's the reason we were able to build our company on nothing. And people never understood that. They think I had some secret sauce, that I had some secret sales pitch that I had written down. People used to call me up, send us your sales pitch. Like I could write it on. It's like as if I could write down jokes. You could write down jokes and make me into a comedian. There's more to it than that. So the solution to everything is the more successfully we forget our selfish motivations, the more successful we become. And the reason why the monasteries have been successful in business for 1,000 years is because they don't care about business. They don't care about making money. They are doing something higher, and all the money that they make and the success that they get in business is a byproduct and a trailing indicator of work, of acting on their mission of what I call service and selflessness. And this galvanizes the people that come around them. They're wonderful people. They're not going to tell you you're going to go to heaven if you buy their eggs. But people kind of buy their eggs kind of like that. They want those Trappist eggs, because that's what we would call in business a brand. It's like Apple has an amazing brand. People line up just for the privilege of buying a new Apple phone. How do you get that magic? The monastery has had this for 1,000 years. And this is what wonderful cultures and what Christianity had, and something, when you look at the ascendant arc of a culture or a religion, that's when they had their brand. And they had something that people wanted to struggle for, wanted to sacrifice for. The last thing I'll say about that is, as a leader, the most important follower you will ever have is yourself. I sometimes ask college students, who's the most important follower you're ever, who wants to be a leader? Of course, everybody wants to be a leader. Well, who's going to be the most important follower? And some people, my children and my whatever, and that's nice. But no, The most important follower you're ever going to have is yourself. And so the first commitment you have to make is to transform yourself into a selfless person. Or you end up doing the absolute worst thing you can possibly do, which I saw in business so much, which is, yeah, those are really good ideas. Do that to my people. I don't need it, but, you know, I'll give you one last little quick story about that. I was talking to the Environmental Protection Agency at a large group. There were several hundred people in Washington, D.C., and I was talking about all this, and I got a bunch of questions. And I said, and I wanted to be very nice. I didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings because it's very bad to hurt people's feelings in America, you know. And so I said, you were a wonderful, you're wonderful people. This has been very nice, but I wanted to point something out. Every question I've gotten from this crowd today, I said, is about how can you get somebody else to change? You either want your boss to change, or you want your colleague in that next cubicle to change, or you want your wife to change, or you want your employee to change. No. Not one person has asked me, how can I change? The most important follower you'll ever have is yourself. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.